Hi there, and welcome to the Institute for Natural Medicine's podcast, The MD Will See You Now. In this podcast, we speak to naturopathic doctors across North America about their whole person approach to health, what patients can expect, and why their work is so very vital to patient health. I'm your host, Annalisa, and today I am just delighted to speak with naturopathic Dr. Ashok Bhandari. Dr. Bhandari is a licensed naturopathic physician in Washington, practicing at the SageMed Clinic in Bellevue. Hailing from beautiful Alberta, Canada, Dr. Bhandari got into sports and sports medicine at quite a young age. And in fact, the very first sports medicine class he took at the tender age of 13. So bringing us to the present day, now Dr. Bhandari combines naturopathic medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, and regenerative medicine to support athletes and help patients of all kinds with chronic pain and cardiometabolic issues. So thanks so much for joining us today, Dr. Bhandari. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm always happy to chat about naturopathic medicine and my practice. It's something that is, like you just mentioned, been a big part of my life for so long. So happy to be here.
Well, we're very happy to give you the opportunity. And speaking of that early life, why don't we start there? So I mentioned in the intro, you grew up in Alberta, Canada, and while doing so, you really loved being physically active. And by no means were you limiting yourself to one type of physical activity. There was soccer, you were doing track and field, you were involved with martial arts. And on the martial art front, to that point, even awards were being won when you were in high school in your particular style of Kung Fu. But while all these accolades were being racked up, the injuries themselves were piling up as well. And that actually had a part to play in your later transition from athlete to coach. So, Dr. Bhandari, if I can take you back to that time, from those perspectives, as both an athlete and a coach, what gaps were you seeing in the healthcare system that were influencing what your current focus is, one of them being sports medicine?
So, I think it was a couple of different things. As an athlete, I was constantly pushing myself physically, and injuries were just, like a part of that process. I just assumed it was normal, like everyone else around me, right? Didn't really have a whole lot of exposure to the idea that preventative care could be a part of the training experience, just the athlete experience. And so it kind of felt like once I had racked up enough injuries, I was basically told that, yep, you're getting old now, and that's just, your body isn't going to do what you used to be able to do. It's just, that's the way it's going to be. I was 22 at the time, right? And I was made to believe that there's nothing to do about these injuries. You do what you can and you move forward, And and I was trying to do like the physical therapy and the chiropractic and different types of modalities, but there was something missing. And so you couple that with just other health struggles I had with general health, especially my digestive health. Actually, that was a big part. And you've got what I would say is like this young athlete really struggling to stay feeling well, despite eating really clean and training 7, 8, 9 times a week at times, trying to get good sleep, all that. Enter my first exposure to a naturopathic doctor in Calgary, where I grew up. And that completely changed my digestive health, literally like 1 month. Simultaneously kickstarted my journey to naturopathic medicine. I realized, hey, there's something different here. There's a way to approach medicine in a way that is more preventative and more holistic, and things like my digestive health can affect how well I recover from my athletic endeavors. And so that was very interesting to me. And I was in my exercise physiology training at the time. I was training to be a strength and conditioning coach for professional athletes. And so, because I felt like I'd lived both sides of that, and I felt, well, this isn't enough. I didn't know enough being an athlete, and I feel like there's so much more to know as from the coaching side. And meeting that naturopathic doctor, it really felt like, hey, there's more here to learn. And so once I arrived at naturopathic medical school, and then I realized that the ND scope is just so wide, and I could continue my sports med journey, and I didn't have to just focus on just medicine, primary care type stuff. It just really evolved my sports medicine journey in a different way. And that I feel was able to create, kind of the experience that I've had now to fill a void that I feel is very much needed.
Well, I can only imagine at the age of 22, what a young age to be told, well, looks like you're done, you know? That's it for that. And hope you have another skill, because I guess this is not a thing that's going to continue for you. So that's wonderful that, because I imagine that many people may receive this advice, if you will, and follow it to the letter and say, well, that's
Exactly.
that. So good on you for just continuing to do your own research and dig into other things that could actually support not only yourself, but as it turns out, support other people. Now that you went on to do that as a coach, and then, of course, as a naturopathic doctor. So turning now a little bit to naturopathic medicine, you've given us quite a good sense of how it helped you. Not only strictly on the sports side, but as you mentioned, well, you didn't put it this way, but I will. Sports does not exist in a vacuum, right? There are digestive issues. There are countless other issues that may impact that performance. So now the way that you practice, yes, naturally, the naturopathic medicine is a focus, but you're bringing in a couple of other approaches that are really very interesting. One of them is Ayurvedic medicine, which many people may know is a traditional medicine used for centuries in India. And you're also bringing in regenerative medicine. So these three approaches combined, of course, you are using for whole person healing. So can you give us a sense? How are patients really benefiting from your knowledge of all these modalities, and how are you actually using them together?
So I think all three of these approaches really they complement each other, and they play very nicely with one another. One of the really big benefits of having access to these modalities together is that I feel like you can fill in the gaps missed by one approach, or by using the principles and tools available in one of the other ones. So to give an example, Ayurvedic medicine is a very traditional constitutional medicine, is what we would call it. It looks at the individual as a whole individual person from a little bit more of an energetic standpoint. And so it's a very unique lens that I can use to look at the patient as a whole, in like, what's their body type, energetic fingerprint, so to speak. And what I've found is that really helps to simplify the big picture of how to keep the patient balanced with everything else that I'm going to do with them. And then you enter the naturopathic medicine approach. It complements this because it provides a little bit more of a nuanced look at optimizing function and health through, the diagnostic workups, as well as traditional and modern therapeutics. So, I've got my herbal medicines and extracts and supplements that we have, the biochemical realm. I've got the nutraceuticals, and as well as modern medications, right? When we need them. And so it kind of helps to bridge that gap from this traditional world medicine to our cutting edge medicine, right? And then so basically, I guess, if you have the naturopathic and the Ayurvedic, the way I see it is I get to start with this incredibly strong foundation. And then on top of that, especially when I'm working with people in pain, whether it's acute or chronic, or injuries, athletic injuries, what have you, I get to add these targeted cutting edge regenerative treatments and therapeutics that can directly heal damaged, injured tissues, and even reverse some of these disease processes, early arthritis, torn rotator cuffs and ligaments and tendons and things like that. And so, each of these approaches can work well on their own, but when you have the combination of these, I feel like it can provide patients with a better overall outcome than just a single one. And I think that's a big part of why some of the outcomes I see in clinical practice with my patients might look a little better than, quote unquote, than what the research would suggest they would be supposed to be able to offer to patients, right? So, it's kind of nice because, we hear all this information about, athletes should have, this much protein and eat this much that, and need this much sleep. But, yes, from a naturopathic standpoint, I can get a better idea of, okay, like these are the general guidelines and approaches of foundational health. And with the Ayurvedic lens, I can really look at a patient and say, and this happens regularly, I would say in practice, I can say, okay, would you do better with a more plant-based or a diet that has a little bit more meat in it, right? It doesn't have to be one size fits all, based on an energetic makeup or constitution of the person. Some people will do better with one way or the other. And, that gives me the tools to be able to optimize either approach. Training schedules, level of intensity when they train, daily routines, how much sleep one person needs versus another. That can be simplified, and I can get more of an insight instead of just basing it off of the general guidelines and rules that we have, by actually looking at that person's individual unique makeup. And I think that really helps provide them a more nuanced approach to their health.
That's well said. And nuanced really is the word, because as you've mentioned, and I'm sure listeners, you have seen this as well, there's constantly studies coming out about, well, what's the best exercise and when is the best time of day? And what about the strength versus the aerobic and all of this? But ultimately, as you said, these are general guidelines. Will that work for some people? Absolutely. Will it work for every single person that reads these guidelines? Absolutely not. And the approach that you're talking about, not only is it patient-centered, you really are focusing on the person in front of you, as opposed to the disease state that they're coming in with. And as you've mentioned as well, this particular combination, between, again, the naturopathic, the Ayurvedic, and the regenerative approaches, it really is giving you, as you mentioned, a unique lens, bringing the traditional into the modern scientific research, bridging that East and West, to use a somewhat hackneyed phrase, but nonetheless is true. And yes, and I think that your patients are greatly benefiting from this. And, you mentioned a couple of things in that last question that really speak to some foundational aspects of health. So when we're looking at things like how much sleep we're getting, broadly speaking, what we're eating, and it makes me think about, so many people have said this over the centuries, that health is not really just the absence of disease. And we hear this and we know it, but yet I feel in North America, we don't really live that way, right? And I saw something on your website that I'd like to dig into a little bit, because it gave some insight into this phenomenon. And you mentioned that oftentimes, unless somebody's coming in with something super specific, they might come in to see you and say, well, I feel quote unquote fine, not fantastic, but I'm feeling fine. And then they work with you. And then you help them to address some of these foundational aspects of health, some of which maybe they knew about beforehand, some of which may have been news to them after they came to see you. And after working with you for a while, well, all of a sudden they're singing a bit of a different tune. And they're saying things like, well, actually, I didn't know that I could feel that good. And I think that word is a really important nuance, because if they don't know that they could feel that good, that it's even possible, then naturally nobody's trying to do it. So I wonder if you can speak to this a bit, Dr. Bhandari, and what would you say to those patients who just say that, yeah, I'm feeling quote unquote fine? How do you think that naturopathic medicine, and indeed this combination of modalities that you're working with, can really help people move from that surviving fine state to a really thriving state?
So this is a huge point, actually, and I think this is absolutely central to my approach to medicine in general. I truly believe that very few of us feel as good in our daily lives as we potentially could. And it's not necessarily a fault of our own either. We're surrounded by essentially toxic environments and exposures, toxic foods, certain things that we call food that really shouldn't be called food. Things that are nutritionally devoid of what we really require as humans to thrive. Our lifestyles, and specifically, like you had mentioned, the role work plays in our daily lives is so dysfunctional, especially in this part of the world, right? Socially, we're as disconnected as ever. So you take that and you've kind of got all the foundations of health being disrupted there, right? We're constantly pushing people to do more in the waking hours we have. Naturally, we're going to feel like crap, right? That's just not how we live, well, right? That's just, when we spend so many years doing that, we forget what it's like to feel mentally relaxed, to feel nutritionally replete, physically strong, and socially connected. So, it's unfortunate, but this is kind of like, this is normal, right? And it's that idea that common isn't normal. So what we call normal is actually common, but that's not necessarily normal. So that feeling of, I feel fine, good enough, I'm able to get to work and then get back and move through my day. That's common, but it's not normal. People say, oh yeah, I wake up tired. That's normal. No, it's common. A lot of us wake up tired, but that's not normal. We shouldn't be waking up tired. Oh, I'm bloated, after every meal. That's just that's common, but it's not normal, right? So we accept this status quo. And so by addressing just the foundations of health, right? Building towards clean food and clean water, movement and exercise, good sleep, a clean environment, getting rid of those the toxicities around us, and healthy social engagement. Just that, people start to feel naturally so much better in ways that they didn't even know or remember they could. They remember that they were able to better socially connect when they had opportunities in life that allowed them to connect better, right? When we're in school and growing up, we have more opportunities to connect with more people. When we get stuck in our day-to-day routines of work, come home, we don't have those same connections that we're able to cultivate because we're always so busy, right? And so you put all these together and people aren't all of a sudden tired 24/7. They're not bloated from all their meals because they can actually digest them because they're eating food that their body can digest, right? Their neck and their back pain, two of the most common complaints in primary care as far as pain goes in primary care medicine. Their achy joints are not regularly achy. They wake up and feel fine. And that's just really, I would say, those few things are some of the first few things we see that change with addressing the foundational pieces of health, right? I would say naturopathic medicine provides that perfect blend of that traditional knowledge of how we're supposed to move through our day, the foods that we eat, the sleep that we should be getting, social engagement, water, environment, all of that. It helps us use that as a foundation. And then it also offers that knowledge and research basis that we have for modern diagnostic testing and then treatments to address these foundations when things need more work than just those basics, right? So I would say one of those examples would be autoimmune disease in patients. So often I see patients with autoimmune disease come in and they've just been told, yeah, you got to be on a disease modifying drug or steroids or some sort of medication that stops this disease from moving. Sure. Sometimes, yes, there's a time and a place for our advanced modern medicine, but autoimmune disease at its core is the body not functioning appropriately with itself, not being able to really balance its most basic of functions, which is its immune system, its natural defense. So there is such a strong foundation of diet that's related to our autoimmune disease, our ability to sleep and regulate our hormones, our stress hormones, our ability to clean our environment. We now have the research, that backs up this traditional knowledge that heavy metals in our environment, water, bugs that are in our environment, whether they're bacteria or viruses or fungus, these things that are in our environment that affect our bodies, when those aren't taken care of, when those are not addressed, they can cause our immune system to go left, right, center, anywhere, right? We don't know. And so much of this can be related to autoimmune conditions. So addressing these foundations when people come in saying, well, no, that's just what I have. That's what I've been told is I have this. I am a person with this disease. And it becomes a part of that identity. And the longer you go with that, the more it becomes just you. But being able to address these foundations and start reversing and peeling those layers, people start to realize, hey, I don't have my flares anymore. I don't need to be on those medications regularly. I don't need to be on any medications. And that is that's when people start to say, oh, I don't have to just wake up, take my meds, go to work, come home, and just be like, yep, that's my life. They can say, I feel great. I can actually go and do more. I get more work done in less time, and I have more energy and more time to do activities that I used to enjoy that I haven't done in 10, 20, 30 years. That's where people start to thrive as we should. And I think that's where I get those kind of exclamations from people saying, I didn't realize that I could feel better. I didn't realize that I wasn't feeling good. I just thought that was the way I was supposed to feel,
I sure do. And, it's such an important point that you brought up about common versus normal, because you're right. We do tend to think of them on the same level, but certainly, and you gave some great examples. Should you be bloated after every meal? No. Should you be waking up tired every day, even most days? Goodness, no. Right?
No.
And to have people not only realize that it doesn't have to be that way, but for you to be able to help them, move that needle towards being more fully themselves, I think is really such a gift. And it's also very interesting when you mention about the identification with a disease, because I think that happens quite a bit. And it's something that's perhaps a bigger topic than we have time to go into here, but from an energetic standpoint, and a psychological, from a self-love standpoint, that has a really big impact. And, many, many years ago, a naturopathic doctor told me something I've never forgotten, which is that they listen very closely when speaking to their patients to hear if the patient will give a possessive pronoun to what they're experiencing. Do they come in and say, my Hashimoto's disease, my headache, my IBS? And when you hear that happening, then certainly there is perhaps some work to be done to not only from the doctor's standpoint, but for the patient to help them realize that you are a person first. You have some difficulties, yes, and let's see what we can do about that. But you are not your disease. You are not your etiology in that sense.
Absolutely.
So what a gift. I mean, what a healing gift. Indeed, you are giving all of these patients. And well, looking at the time here, that's about all the time that we've got, as much as I would love to continue. But let me just go over a couple of the points that you've mentioned, because you've made some very good ones.
Sure.
In addition to the common versus normal point that you made, you did mention that, the ability that you have to combine these different modalities and approaches really does allow them to fill in the gaps, so to speak, for each other. And you end up with this really nice holistic medicine. And also you've mentioned that, a little bit about your own background, and kind of what that journey was like for you when you were on the other side of that, being told, well, this is now your life, and this is now what you have to look forward to or not to look forward to, as the case may be. And you've mentioned a little bit about why being fine or feeling fine really is not the goal, and why life is so much more than that, and how naturopathic medicine can really help us with going beyond fine. So listeners, if you're wondering where the transcript will be, where the additional links will be, they'll be in the podcast notes. So please check that out. You can also learn more about Dr. Bhandari's work there. And Dr. Bhandari, all this being said, do you have any final words you'd like to leave us on today?
So, I would say, just coming back to kind of what we talked about in the last point there, is that we don't know how good we can feel until we get there, right? We don't know what's missing oftentimes from our sense of well-being and our health and our function until we actually get to experience it. You can't know something until you experience it often. And so, even if we feel fine, I think there's always room for, and that's really one of the big things, one of the big tenets of naturopathic medicine is prevention. There's always room for prevention, even if we're feeling fine, right? We can prevent and be able to build up our foundation so that we can feel the same way we do in our 20s, 30s when we're 40, 50, 60, 70 and onwards, right? We don't have to accept that disease is going to come around the corner and we're just going to be a bystander to it. We can actively take a role in our health. And I think that's my biggest goal in practice is finding what is the goals for people, what do they want to do? And then educate on being active and being the driver of your health. And if there's anything that people can take away from this, is that there's always an opportunity to be the driver of your own health. And it's just about finding the right information. And yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Well, I couldn't think of a more appropriate place to leave it on. We do not have to be bystanders in our own lives with our own health. We can be the driver of our own health, and we can be active participants as well in our own health. So Dr. Bhandari, thank you so much again. It's been a pleasure to speak with you today.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
And listeners, thank you for joining us as well. And we will see you next time.